This episode is sponsored by Anchor. If you haven't heard of Anchor by Spotify, let me fill you in. So, Anchor has everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. You can record and edit your podcast straight from your computer or your phone, whichever works for you. And it's as simple as downloading the Anchor app or going to anchor.fm. And when hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many, many more. And the best part about Anchor is that it's 100% free. It's pretty much the ultimate podcast tool at the moment, and honestly, I haven't seen it getting enough attention. We use Anchor for this very podcast, and it has made things 10 times easier because, like I said, it's literally everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Again, go to anchor.fm or download the Anchor app to get started.
What's up, guys? You're listening to Lucid, and today we have a really cool topic. So basically, we're going to be talking about incidents that have overwhelming proof of the paranormal, and in particular with these extraterrestrials. So I guess I could do a rundown and we'll say the names of them, and some of you might be familiar with them, some of them you probably never heard of, but we're gonna do 3 cases. We'll, I guess, give them a synopsis of the story, talk about it a little bit, and try and play skeptic, but I mean, these are pretty cut and dry. I don't know how skeptical you can be because these are pretty good examples of solid evidence, I'd say.
Yeah, kind of irrefutable. So
so we're going to be talking about the case of the Hopkinsville Goblins, the case of the Flatwoods Monster, and the case of Falcon Lake. They're all somewhat similar, kind of all in somewhat remote areas. And
I mean, none of these happened in a city or anything. So I guess we can start with the Falcon Lake incident.
Okay, so Falcon Lake was essentially a gentleman that was from Europe, I believe, moved to Canada, was an amateur prospector, and Falcon Lake is a lake, I think, around Winnipeg, maybe. It's like a national park or reserve with a fair amount of forest around, and has this big lake, and there's minerals there. So he was going to prospect and whatnot, and I believe he spoke a bunch of different languages. He was from Northern Europe, and this happened in
1967, I think. Yeah,
so it happened in the late 60s, and I believe he was around during World War II and whatnot, so, and had maybe had military experience. I can't exactly remember, but he essentially went to this remote lake and saw a couple of aircrafts that were pretty unrecognizable, and he thought, oh, this must be the government testing out secret aircraft, and it was a remote area that I guess would be good for testing stuff like that.
right.
So he didn't think too much of it. He sees this aircraft kind of acting erratic, and then sees it stop and land. So he's looking at it, and he's wondering, what is this? I don't see any country's flag on this. I don't see a Canadian flag on this. Looks really weird craftsmanship.
He actually made a sketch of the ship that he saw.
Do you want to describe what the ship looks like for them then, I guess?
Yeah, it was a kind of like a traditional alien aircraft you see in media, but not exactly. It was more not rectangular, but it had edges. It wasn't all circular. And
it was like a cone, kind of, right? Like a cone that's flat on top. So
and he sketched this thing, so everyone got to see his. And the reason he had time to sketch it was because the thing was sitting there, near him for, I don't know the exact time frame, but it was a long time. He was just waiting for someone to come out come out of this ship so he can talk to them and be like, hey, what's going on? Why are you landing here? Blah 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 blah. So
Yeah, so essentially he saw it, flying, I believe. It landed, and I don't think he spoke multiple languages.
yeah,
So he said that he called out in like a bunch of different languages and never got a response to any of them. Went up to try and touch the thing, and it took off, and it burned him, like shot him and burned him. And he's in a remote area. He makes the trek back to town, calls his son, and they take him to the hospital. And I mean, this is a really short and abridged version of the story. So if you are interested, you can go and check it out in more detail. But essentially, he's yelling at this ship, goes close up to it, gets shot by it, like a projectile hits him, and he goes to the doctor, and they were baffled and had no clue. And it was like third-degree burns in his skin, and it was like a substance that they never saw a burn like that.
it was also it was akin to a chemical burn, not like heat. Not a heat burn and a chemical burn are two different things, and it was closer to a chemical burn than a like heat burn. And didn't they say it was radiation in there, or
Yeah.
so it was
Yeah.
it was radiation, and he was throwing up, and he was nauseous and disorientated, and and they were just like, what the hell happened to this dude?
Which makes sense, because when you hear about, first off, when you hear about UFOs and them touching down, radiation is a common theme of them, like, taking what you'll hear in one of the upcoming stories is like, usually when UFOs land and you hear about residue from them, it's something that like it leaves the area radioactive.
Right, yeah.
Like,
You hear
slightly.
that kind of often. And I just want to mention the burn mark on him was like a grid. Like it was like dots, all lined up perfectly, like parallel to each other. It was like, what else could have possibly like done a burn that in that way? That's one of the things that was weird about it. The burn itself.
Yeah, so essentially he got burned by this thing, goes to the doctors, and was experiencing nausea, vomiting, was in horrible shape. Like he barely even made it to the hospital.
I'm surprised he did, because the way they describe how he was feeling is like, I'm surprised he didn't keel over and just like he was able to walk like that far.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much like how it was documented is doctors had never seen anything like that, didn't know how to treat it, didn't really know what to do, and everyone was just super confused. And it's kind of sad, because essentially this guy came out with this story, which it would have came out in some capacity regardless, and then people just gave him so much shit.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how the media works. Governments own these media corporations and companies, and they basically do what they can to push their own narrative and really never make themselves look bad. For a long time, anyone that has abduction stories or an experience with something paranormal or an experience that can't be easily explained,
It
you
gets
just have
shut down.
people coming out of the woodwork just to like bring up bullshit. And if they can't think of anything logical that it could be, they just go and say, oh well, this guy's an idiot, and just try and like talk shit about the person. And
just say they're
basically
crazy. Essentially,
just try and gaslight them and be like, yeah, you can't trust this guy's opinion. And basically just act like assholes and try and sully their character or name.
Yeah, I mean,
And that happened to this gentleman, and he seemed like a really nice guy. and it's really unfortunate. He went through a traumatic experience.
Yeah, and he
And
literally
then,
had burns and proof of this event happening, but uh he was still like berated by everyone. And I don't know if times have changed, but that just goes to show, like, you know, if something like that
I don't
happens to
think
you,
much has changed since then,
probably not,
honestly.
definitely not. If something like this happens to you, you're more or less completely alone because people are not going to give you the light of day to even explain your side of things and stuff like that. That's unfortunately just how it is right now, and apparently back then too. So
Yeah. Which, one thing that is crazy and why we have this on the list, I did not see anything where anyone even tried to dispute it, really. All people
it's pretty
were
hard
doing
to.
was were basically just assassinating his character because they didn't
Yeah,
have anything to say, hey, this is what this was. No one had any clues as to what it was, and no one even tried to guess. They just assassinated the guy's character and tried to
yeah,
belittle him because it was clear cut what it was, that it was unexplainable, and the only thing that it could be was either a government, a top secret government thing, which you would think if that were the case, they would have not let that get out
exactly.
because,
They probably would have ended him.
yeah,
To
they
be
would have, if
honest,
they were gonna do that, they probably would have just killed him, or they would have
right?
found out, hey, look at this radius, this guy probably is gonna have to go to the hospital, and then at least talk to him and be like, yep, you're getting debriefed. But that
Yeah,
didn't happen. So clearly
right.
it wasn't a government thing because they would not have let that they wouldn't have let that slide.
Yeah, no way.
So, I mean, this is a pretty clear cut case that the only thing it could be is an outside force.
Right. But yeah,
And
let's
I'm
do
sure
one of
that's
the
why
other
he was
two.
I'm sure that's why he was ridiculed as much as he was, you know.
Yeah.
So the next case that we're gonna move on to happened in Kentucky and is usually referred to as the Hopkinsville Goblins case. So essentially, Hopkinsville is in southern Kentucky, uh, bordering the Mammoth Cave system, and there's a farmhouse in Hopkinsville with from what I understand, the layout is there's a farmhouse and a family that lived in there, and there was a bunch of old mine shafts that connected to the cave system, and essentially this family one night was harassed by a bunch of what they called little gray aliens, I believe, and they just kept seeing them all over their farmhouse, seeing them at their windows, seeing them trying to get in their doors. Basically, felt like they were under attack, and it was a family in Kentucky, so they all had weapons. So basically, this family, multiple of the adults in the house, like 4 or 5 different adults, just were opening fire outside, like towards their windows, their doors, outside of their house, and basically under siege by these, these aliens. Just kept seeing them run around, were shooting at them, and police end up coming up, and they get to the house, and the house looks like a war zone. Literally, just their house was riddled with bullet holes. Everyone was traumatized,
I mean,
and
that's horrifying. So like,
yeah, it's like a horror movie,
yeah, literally, it
It's kind of
literally
like
is.
that scene in Nope where the kids are basically fucking with them and wearing the ET masks and hiding in the stables. Except it wasn't a movie. There might have been a movie with this premise. Now that I think
There
about it, but I
probably
can't.
has been, to be honest.
But I can't say it for certain. But yeah, so essentially this family just was opening fire, trying to shoot these things because they felt like they were under attack, and it was multiple of them. And from what I understand is they went back into the cave system, and kind of like how we talked about radiation, another thing that you hear with ETs is cave systems. and that kind of goes along with missing 411 and just the amount of people disappearing in national forests that have caves is absolutely crazy. Like if you look at the amount of people that disappear, usually they're by cave systems. If you actually look at like where the majority of people that disappear, if you look at that book and the statistics in there, and I don't think that's a coincidence.
Probably not. I mean, of course you can't say for sure, but I mean,
Yeah, I mean
chances are
it's all
probably not.
speculation. What do we really have proof about anything?
Yeah.
Regardless of something that's paranormal. How much proof do we have with stuff that's, even scientifically based? Like, we just have the scientific method. It's not like that's even
It's
100%.
everything's a
Like,
theory.
we're just basing shit off of. That's why you never hear scientists say, "Oh yeah, this is 100%." They won't even say that about gravity. Because at the end of the day, we don't fucking know.
Yeah.
We're just like, yeah, we see that this is how this works, and we test it. We test it 1,000 times, and it works 998 times. So those two are outliers. So I'm going to say this is how it works. But like, we don't. There's very little things that we have, like, concrete evidence that we're like, yes, this is 100% how it works. You'll never see science say that.
Yeah.
Because they know better. And the amount of just phenomenons and shit that we don't understand is there's definitely more stuff that we have no clue how it works and no clue why it's here and no clue why it works like that than stuff that we have figured out. There's way more stuff we don't have figured out than we have figured out. So why stuff like this is ridiculed to the extent that it is, I really don't get it. But
yeah, so people with this Hopkinsville incident, people were saying that apparently what they saw were owls because they were around the size of owls, but I mean,
yeah, which again, you'll see that in the next story as well. An owl is a very distinct thing.
Yeah.
It did happen at night, but an owl. First off, I'm pretty sure owls are, kind of loners. I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, you don't see a pack of
packs of
owls. That doesn't. You don't see that.
Yeah,
saying
they're
it doesn't
solitary.
exist.
I'm pretty sure they're mainly solitary animals. And for what, honestly, what is the likelihood of owls going up to doors, windows? I mean, from what it sounds like, these creatures try to get in. An owl would not be trying to get in somewhere because they don't have arms; they have wings. So, like,
yeah, I mean, you don't open fire at something that isn't that you don't think is a threat to you in some manner, right?
Yeah,
like,
and
clearly they thought they were a threat.
If you're in the woods of Kentucky, you know what an owl looks like because you hear them and have seen them more than likely. If you're in an area where there is owls, which West Virginia, Kentucky, I guess parts of Ohio will have owls if you're in dense forested areas, but you would know what an owl would look like. And what are the chances that you have 5 to 6 owls, all of them fully grown and big enough to be 3, 4, or 5 feet tall? I mean, honestly, I think that sounds more ridiculous than fucking aliens.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the running theme with these stories is the explanations they give, the mental gymnastics they do to get these explanations is literally crazier than just saying it's aliens or it's paranormal or it's unexplainable. Like, it's literally crazier to say, oh yeah, a pack of owls. It's like, dude, what?
And here's the thing, these creatures were getting shot at and were moving around to different spots. If you shot at an owl, it would scat and it would be gone.
It would be, yeah. There's no way they'd stick around. This is an event.
They're pretty skittish animals, and yeah, if it was getting shot at, it would have its fight or flight and it would leave. Like,
This
how
lasted
many birds do you
hours.
know that just take being shot at and don't try and fly away?
Yeah.
None.
This also lasted
I mean,
hours. Like, they were shooting at them. Otherwise, their house wouldn't be as destroyed as it was when they found them. So they were shooting at these things for quite a while, and like Chris said, if it's owls, they would be gone, and certainly not for however many hours that went on for. That doesn't make the slightest
yeah.
bit of sense.
Do you have the information? When did this happen? Was it the 50s?
1955.
Yeah. So this was the 50s. So yeah, obviously they didn't take any photographs or anything. I don't believe.
Well, they did describe the creatures though.
Yeah, I'm just saying, even of the house, like, but from the descriptions, I believe it sounds like little gray aliens. From
They
what I
were like
remember.
little men with like. They said big ears, I believe, like big, like floppy ears and like big eyes, and they were like
Yeah,
kind of
I
short.
remember hearing the term saucers for eyes when hearing about the case.
Yeah,
Big saucers for eyes, which is, you know, when we talk about the next one, that is kind of somewhat similar. So yeah, so basically, this to run back the synopsis of what happened to this family. They were just enjoying a night and were essentially berated by aliens trying to enter their house, and they opened fire and basically had a standoff for hours, and eventually police arrive or sheriffs arrived, and this family was ridiculed too, and it
yeah.
was a big deal, and
That's
they
the
were
most unfortunate
ridiculed
thing.
and uh, had it pretty rough for a while because of media trying to talk to them and basically belittling them. This is the 50s, and you
Yeah,
know,
yeah. I mean, that's what's unfortunate is that these people go through something that's traumatic for them, and then that's bad enough, and then you got people saying like you're
yeah, calling them
crazy and all
crazy.
this other
Yeah,
shit. It's like
basically
that's
just
even
saying there's
worse
something
for them.
wrong with you. And yes, instead of giving these people support, because obviously you're not going to destroy your house and shoot in your house and
Exactly.
destroy your property for no reason. And it's
Yeah.
more than one person. How many cases of um, so this is unrelated, but this is somewhat related. So I don't know if you ever heard of these two cases. They don't have to do with UFOs, but the dancing sickness that happened to a village in, I think, England, where everyone was like dancing until they died. And then there was another basically just cases of mass hysteria where they're just like, yeah, people thought it was something, and then it basically took over, and then they all like, it happened to where people basically started like having shared delusions. I mean, that's like ridiculous, because honestly, the mental gymnastics to be like, yeah, this is just shared delusions, and then just call it that. What's
Yeah.
the difference between that and paranormal? Like, what's the fucking difference? Because they're not basing it off of anything.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it might as well just
That's
be
true.
paranormal, because they didn't psychoanalyze, and honestly, psychology most of the time is a crock of shit. And I mean, truthfully, I believe that. Like, we base shit off of very little information and
Yeah.
trying to look at patterns in behavior, when like a lot of people don't have any patterns in their behavior at all and just act erratically.
Yeah.
So how do you explain that? You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, they tried to say it was owls, which is you know pretty far fetched. So I would say this is a pretty cut and dry case of clearly something was there, and
Something that was not a fucking bird.
yeah, and like you said, it lasted for hours, and they caused serious damage to their property, and pretty traumatizing incident and then were ridiculed for it. And I haven't heard any other theory besides, oh yeah, maybe it was owls. So
Yeah, I haven't either. So that seems to be the main like theory that quote unquote rational explanation that's out there, and it's not a very strong one.
yeah, I would say that's pretty weak as far as anecdotal evidence goes. So I guess we'll just hop right into the third one.
Yeah, we can do the Flatwoods Monster.
And yeah, like you said, the third one is the Flatwoods Monster, which was at the 50s as well.
That was also the 50s, yes.
Yeah, so that was in the 50s, and that took place in West Virginia, which, if you know your geography, Ohio, you have Ohio, and then the bottom of Ohio, the southwest part of Ohio, you have Kentucky, and then Kentucky borders West Virginia to the east, and West Virginia borders Ohio to the northeast. So these are all kind of relatively in the same area. Happened in the 1950s. A family was in the woods, saw what basically a saucer-like object go into the woods. They went to investigate it, and it landed. And then they see something come out of it that basically looks like a.
It was kind of like a upside down spade.
A spade. Yeah, a spade-like creature that was, I think they said like 10 feet tall, right?
Yeah, like something like that, like pretty
10
damn
feet
tall.
tall with red glowing eyes, that were saucer-shaped, and it was like hovering. And it kind of, I believe it chased after them, or maybe like they saw it and felt like it was chasing after them because they were scared. And a whole family saw it. It went back into the ship eventually, and then took off. And what makes this indisputable evidence, where the ship was, there was a burn in the ground. And I'm pretty sure to this day, stuff doesn't grow where that ship landed. And they took soil samples and found radiation in the soil. And they tried to say it was an oily substance. But you don't just go and pick soil and say, oh, yeah, there's radiation in it. What are the chances of that?
Yeah, so, there's usually something that causes radiation to be there.
So there is natural radiation, but in a
just in the dirt, just randomly,
something was clearly there. There was burn marks in the ground, and then there's radiation where there are burn marks in the ground, and stuff wouldn't grow there.
Yeah, I think. And where have you heard that before? That's not something I've heard an explanation for.
Yeah. And if we go back to the Falcon Lake incident story, or event, I don't even want to call it a story, because it did take place.
Yeah.
The guy gets shot. They basically find radiation, and then this ship takes off, and the ground was burnt, and they saw radiation. And
yes, it's another case of radiation.
What it sounds like to me, it was probably, and they said, a being with saucer-like eyes. I'm sure it sounds like it was a being that was in a spacesuit. Because
that is what it sounds like.
From what, especially, this is considered a cryptid, even though I don't really understand why it's a cryptid necessarily. But it's considered a cryptid, and so there's a lot of depictions of it. And
but the thing is, it keeps a general look in every depiction. It always has the spade head or helmet, whatever you want to see it as. And that's a very distinct, I'm not saying this proves anything, but that's a very distinct thing for someone to make up and be like, yeah, this thing looked like it had a dress, it had a skirt or something, and it had a spade, upside down spade for a head with glowing eyes. That's a very distinct and specific, like,
Yeah, I mean,
for someone to make
it
up.
looks like a spacesuit, and the fact that like you don't see legs, and it kind of hovered, like it's been depicted as hovering with glowing eyes. You can find basically what people said it looked like, and here's the thing that is a common thing. They tried to debunk it, and they tried to say it was an owl. But first off, if you ever seen an owl, they have a rounded head. Almost exclusively have a rounded
Yeah.
head. I've never seen an owl that its head comes to a point.
Yeah, that unless there's an owl that
And
looks like that we don't know about, but I don't
the
know.
only reason you could maybe say, "Oh, this was an owl," is because it was hovering off the ground. But also, this thing is exclusively depicted with arms. In every iteration that someone has talked about it, it has had visible arms, and it has had a metallic look. I don't know if you've seen barn owls are white, not silverish and black.
Yeah, and I also saw, like, they were saying, yeah, it's possibly an owl, but they were also saying it was an owl that, because they said this thing was like 10 feet tall or something, so they're
Yeah, I
like,
mean, this
what's the
thing is
explanation
always
for that?
depicted bigger
And
than a grown man.
well, they
And
were saying maybe you saw a visual phenomenon with the moonlight or something that made an owl look bigger than it actually was, and they were actually seeing a shadow of some kind. And I was just like,
which
that sounds that
yes,
sounds ridiculous.
like we said, mental gymnastics, and a
Literally.
shadow doesn't have glowing eyes.
Exactly.
In
Yeah.
no way.
That's, yeah.
When you
that
look
too.
at a shadow, the eyes are never like. Just go and look at your shadow. Are there eyes? It's always just a black mass.
Yeah.
And a shadow would not be hovering. A shadow you would see on the ground still. Like
Right.
a shadow is just a reflection of light, and basically the light shining around you. You're blocking out the light source, and that's why you have a shadow, because it is basically the still image of you blocking the light and all the light surrounding you, and you basically being a cutout of the light.
Right.
And the moon is usually not that bright, and it was in a wooded area, so you have trees that are taking up the light source and blocking the light. I mean, and the fact that there was a ship seen, I believe.
Yeah. That there's literally no, no given logical explanation for the ship. They always say, "Oh, you saw this, you saw that," for the actual being, but what about the ship? What, like, and to say something's a visual phenomenon is ridiculous to me, because if it's something we know and have documented, like, say, I don't know, like rainbows, for example, that would be considered, I mean, it's technically a weather phenomenon, but it's still a visual phenomenon, right? That's something we have documented. We have plenty of evidence that happens. What do we have documented that just shows a shadow the way they described it? Because to my knowledge, there's nothing documented that it explains that away. If there was, I would say,
nothing
okay,
really.
valid argument.
And just to bring this up, a case that is probably the most famous paranormal case of all time, and something that, even if you're not into the paranormal, don't care about aliens, don't care about Mothman. Mothman happened in West Virginia, not that far, and is described eerily similar to the Flatwoods Monster. Glowing eyes, being about 10 foot tall.
That's also in Virginia. That's the same area.
Yeah, they're both in West Virginia. And people also try to call that now too. So apparently anything that is big and
yeah,
is big, they're like, it's an owl.
Yeah, that's honestly what it seems like.
If it's something that you can't explain, it's an owl.
Yeah,
And
that's
honestly,
what it feels like.
I mean, I live in a city, obviously, but there's trees and forests and all that shit, and I don't live that far from Kentucky or West Virginia, so I would think there's owls around here. Why the fuck have I never seen an owl? I'm pretty sure they're pretty solitary and reclusive animals, and you don't see them that often. So I guess that might be, but for people to get mistake an owl and then it be in, you know, you see multiple of them at the same time, like that for the Hopkinsville case, or even
Right.
the fact like with the Mothman, or that you see something that's that big. I mean, I just, that's just we have to say something because we can't admit that it was something other than
Yeah.
easily
Any
explainable.
anything but that, I guess. Cause like, yeah,
And yet, the
barn owl.
Flatwoods
It's like, dude,
monster
come on.
is it's pretty widely recognized, and it was even in like Fallout 76. They made it
Yeah,
part of the
yeah.
game.
That
The
was
Easter
cool.
egg. There's a clothing brand called Loudmouth Trends or Loudmouth Threads that literally has designs about Mothman and the Flatwoods monster. Uh, so
I
it's
mean,
it's a pretty well-known case, but it's cut and dry. Like, they took samples where the ship was, and there was literally a circle burned into the ground. So not only do you have an alien sighted, people witnessing the alien, people witnessing a ship, people seeing it go in a ship and take off, and then soil samples with radiation. I mean, that's a lot of things to fall into place to where it's like, yeah, so now leave it alone. Like,
yeah. It's, I guess that's just easy to say. Like, and the thing, something I've heard with Mothman is so they said the first person that saw, quote unquote Mothman may have actually seen like a big owl, whatever. But they say that the sightings have gotten so frequent back then that people started to look out for it. Like, people were, so their mind was saying, if I see a big bird, it's Mothman. So they're saying, oh, they saw the same bird, but they were under the impression that Mothman is real. So naturally, their brain forms a visual image of Mothman because that's what they want to believe that they're seeing.
yeah,
And
which in these cases, that doesn't matter because these were one-offs where basically people come across something and
yeah, and I'm sure. I mean, that theory is implying that every single person that has ever seen this being has heard about it before, which is not true
yeah,
because some of these
and
people have never heard of this thing
yeah, some
before.
people hadn't heard about it, and the fact that the brain does do stuff like, we say you see a light and you say, oh, this looks like a praying mantis. Our brain does do stuff like
It
that,
does. Yeah, it
but
does.
I'm pretty sure you wouldn't mistake something for a. You would probably want to say it's an owl. Like, if you saw
Yeah,
something
in
that
our
you were
reality.
like, this this is an owl, because you want to make something familiar. Like, your brain
Yeah,
tries
right.
to rationalize stuff. So if it's something you haven't seen, you would instantly say, "Oh yeah, it was probably an owl." So
Right.
why would it not be called the Owl Man? Why was it called the Mothman? Why do people say it
Right.
looked like a 10-foot moth? And I'm not suggesting that the Flatwoods Monster and Mothman are the same entity, yeah, by any means. I'm just saying, like, if you look at the comparisons, like, and look, uh, for anyone, I'm gonna plug a uh, a little mini documentary series for obviously they don't know who we are, but there's a channel that I think they were based in Cincinnati, and they went to Hellier, Kentucky, where I think was where it's close to where the Hopkinsville Goblin case happened. And they also went to West Virginia and North Carolina, and if you look at it, that's all by cave systems. So I mean, there's a lot of different things that are very similar, with at least two of these stories, and honestly, all three of the stories have a lot of, shared attributes. And it would
they
make
do.
sense if something is real, it's probably going to have similar attributes, or at least some
Yeah.
similarities. And I mean that you would sit for anything else when something has similar attributes, you say, "Oh, well, that's scientific method. This is how it looks, and we've seen multiple things like that, so that's what it is." And that's what's called proof and evidence. It's
Yeah.
when you see things that more than one time and are similar. I mean, is that not what evidence is?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't really think there could be any explanation other than probably something in a suit. And the fact that it was levitating and continued to levitate. So say obviously you've seen an owl. The way that owls move, I don't think they can just levitate because of the way that they're not a hummingbird. So
Yeah.
and they have pretty big wings. So if they're flying, they're going to be coming towards you, not in a standstill position.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
And it wouldn't just hover. I mean, you can tell when something is flying. Like it's a very distinct thing, and it would probably be coming very, very fast towards you. And it doesn't sound like this thing was just. It sounded like this thing was hovering somewhat like slowly and menacingly.
Yeah. I mean, if an owl, I don't think owls can hover at all, to be honest. Like, yeah, obviously they can fly, right? And I could be wrong, but I don't believe they can stay in one spot and still be airborne. I don't think owls can do that. I don't think those big birds can do that.
No,
And,
I don't
like-
believe they can.
Like eagles and vultures,
like,
I don't think they can do that.
The reason a hummingbird can even do that is just because the fact that they flick their feathers and their wings so fast. Like,
Yeah.
you've seen a hummingbird, you can barely even like make out unless you have like a high-tech camera where you slow it down. You can barely even make out the flapping of their wings because they
Yeah, because they're so fast.
so fast. Whereas an owl, especially an owl that is big enough to be mistaken for something that's so for something an owl to have a shadow that's 10 foot tall, there has to be at least a 5-6 foot owl.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're ever that big. They're maybe like 4 foot max. So even if we wanted to be generous and say a 4.5 foot owl, how much would that thing weigh? That would weigh at least like 80 pounds. You think an 80-pound owl would be able to flap its wings fast enough to hover?
Yeah, like,
No fucking
sounds
way.
ridiculous.
So yeah, I
Wait.
mean those are three pretty clear-cut cases of evidence of the paranormal and extraterrestrial encounters. I
Yeah,
would
they're
say.
pretty much the closest to being irrefutable as it gets, I say.
Yeah, and I'm not sure with the Flatwoods Monster whether those people are ridiculed or not, but I'm sure they were.
I'm
And that
sure
one
they
has,
were.
that one is kind of taken on a whole legacy, whereas like the Falcon Lake incident and the Hopkinsville case, where they're known but they're not well known. Whereas the
Yeah.
Flatwoods Monster, I'm guessing it's just because it was a clear view of a creature, and the
I think
fact that
it's-
it was so distinct.
Yeah, that's what I think it is. It was such a specific, distinct look that it just stuck, and people were like, "Yeah, that never seen something like that before."
And
I think
I'm sure we
Mothman's
can
kind of the
put,
same thing.
I'm sure we can put on screen examples of what the Flatwoods Monster looked like.
Yeah, for those on YouTube, I can definitely do that. Mothman, and they literally, I don't know about Flatwoods Monster, but they literally have statues of Mothman in West Virginia. Like, I don't know if they're like honoring him or something, but they pretty much
Well-
accept that that's a thing that people saw.
Yeah, I mean it's a big deal, and it's and it's the fact that it was connected to so for Mothman, we're not going to get into the whole story because that is, I mean, there's whole books, movies.
That's a video in itself, and an episode in itself.
That's a whole big thing. And honestly, we probably could have went into more detail and had an entire episode on each one of these cases.
Yeah,
because I mean, there is a lot of detail, but you guys get the gist if you're more interested, or if you're interested in learning more about these things. You can do your own research, and
yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of stuff we have left out. So
yeah, but the Mothman incident happened, and then a bridge collapsed, and a lot of people died.
Yeah, it was kind of like a bad omen type thing.
Yeah, and where Point Pleasant is, it's literally on the border of Ohio and West Virginia. I'm not sure where Flatwoods, West Virginia is in comparison.
I'm not sure. I mean, West Virginia is not a particularly big place, so I'm not saying they gotta be right next to each other, but I mean, I feel like they can't be too far apart, I don't know.
It's somewhat close to the Ohio border, I think. Like,
the Mothman sightings?
Well, the Mothman sightings are very close to Ohio's border.
Okay.
But no, Flatwoods is probably a couple, maybe like 3 hours from Ohio's border, I would think, maybe. For me, it is you know what? Probably not, because for me, it's about a 4-hour drive. Yeah, I would just say that's pretty indisputable as far as evidence goes. And the fact that basically they just had to grasp at straws and then try and assassinate everyone's character because they knew that the owls and the Falcon Lake incident, they didn't even try to come up with an explanation. They just went straight to, oh, this guy's a foreigner, so he must be a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
Which pretty sad if you ask me. Not a big fan of that.
Yeah, I mean, people just don't have an open mind. I guess that's all it is. I don't even know if that's really.
Yeah, I don't even think it's an open mind. I think it's kind of what we said. When something like that, where let's look at COVID, for example. During COVID, all of a sudden, all the government's finally like, yeah, oh yeah, UFOs, yeah, they're here, like they're real, yeah. And they start disclosing all the information that was from around this time period, and the 70s, and that's kind of when they had to admit MK Ultra was real, and just kind of admitting all the fucked up stuff the government was into and doing, and they're just masters at gaslighting everyone and changing the subject.
Yeah,
and that's what they do with stuff like this. They just try and change the subject as fast as they can. And we didn't really talk about any Men in Black sightings as far as this, but the Men in Black were involved in maybe not these cases, but a lot of times you see the Men in Black involved. Like that happened with Mothman. You see people in black suits, and you have the whole Men in Black lore.
Yeah, and that's a whole different video as well.
Yeah,
we'll probably touch on that at some point.
So thanks for watching, guys. If you have heard about these cases already, let us know. Let us know what you think. Do some research of yourselves, and what can you fucking do except try and spread awareness and make videos and make episodes like this where you tell other sides of the story and give evidence and give stories of people that experience things, and say, hey, these are valid, and the only you guys are just trying to distract instead of giving real reasonable explanations as to what this stuff is.
Yeah, for sure.
So hopefully you liked it. This was a long one, but I think this was an interesting one. So I'm sure you guys will like it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure not everyone has heard about these stories, all three of them. So
All right. Well,
yeah,
thanks for listening, guys, and we'll catch you next time.
we'll see you guys next time. Peace.